Jaclyn Smith finally breaks her silence about Kate Jackson, and the moment feels decades overdue. Now at 80 years old, she looks back at the whirlwind that was Charlie's Angels, remembering how fame lifted them overnight, while tension quietly gathered behind the sparkling image America adored. Their bond appeared unshakable on screen, yet Smith now admits there were signs that Jackson was carrying a heavier burden than anyone realized. She recalls the long hours, the shifting direction of the scripts, and the quiet moments when Jackson's patience with the series began to fade. Season 3 became the turning point, the moment Smith sensed that the trio who launched a television phenomenon would not stay together much longer. What she offers now is not controversy, but a truth refined by decades of reflection. It casts new light on a departure fans have wondered about for 40 years, and invites us into the story behind it. When Charlie's Angels first appeared on television in 1976, few could predict how quickly it would reshape the landscape of American pop culture. The pilot aired on March 21st of that year, introducing viewers to a trio that felt fresh, bold, and entirely different from anything seen before. Jaclyn Smith stepped into the role of Kelly Garrett with a quiet confidence, while Kate Jackson shaped Sabrina Duncan with a sharp intelligence that reflected her own ambitions. Together with Farrah Fawcett as Jill Monroe, the original Angels carried a spark that resonated with audiences almost instantly. What made their beginning even more remarkable was the path that brought them there. Kate Jackson had first met producers Aaron Spelling and Leonard Goldberg in 1975, long before the idea truly took shape. During that early meeting, she noticed a portrait of three angels on the wall, and the title Charlie's Angels came from a simple comment she made in that room. The show's identity, the very words that would become iconic, began with her voice. Even her role was originally different, since she was cast first as Kelly Garrett, then chose Sabrina instead, leaving Kelly open for Smith to play. Their characters, born from these early decisions, would go on to define the series. From the moment the weekly series premiered on September 22, 1976, the pace of their lives changed dramatically. Fame did not come gently. It arrived in waves, with magazine covers, long production days, and an unexpected pressure to maintain the glamour that viewers expected. When Smith later reflected on those years, she described the three women as simply girls having fun, a memory that revealed the closeness grounding them through even the most overwhelming moments. The industry often imagined rivalry, yet her recollection pointed instead to friendship, shared laughter, and the feeling of discovering success side by side. The chemistry on screen was undeniable, and it pushed the show into national attention faster than anyone predicted. Charlie's Angels even landed on the cover of Time magazine, a rare distinction for a new series driven by young actresses still finding their footing. Beneath that success, however, the demands grew heavier. The scripts expanded, the expectations expanded, and each angel carried a different response to the growing weight. Smith approached it with steadiness, a measured calm that allowed her to adapt as the show evolved. Jackson approached it with the determination of someone who cared deeply about story, structure, and purpose. By the end of the first season, change had already begun. Farrah Fawcett left the show, and Cheryl Ladd stepped in to take her place. The trio shifted, the energy shifted, and yet Smith and Jackson remained at the center, guiding the series into new territory. Their partnership, so strong in those early years, held the balance between glamour and grit. As the seasons progressed, the episodes grew more stylized, and the heart of the show rested on the dynamic between the angels who stayed. What anchors this beginning is the sense of possibility that surrounded them. Three women, each navigating fame in her own way, learning to trust the camera, the audience, and one another. Smith's gentle steadiness, Jackson's focused intensity, and the creative momentum of the producers formed a foundation that shaped the show's first 3 seasons. Yet even in this early brightness, subtle shifts were forming. The long hours, the changing scripts, and the enormous expectations were quietly building toward a moment when the original trio would no longer stand together. Jaclyn's path was beginning to bend towards something different, even if few recognized it at the time. This early brightness carried a quiet shift beneath it, a slow tightening of the demands placed on each woman. The long hours, the changing scripts, and the growing expectations would eventually pull Kate Jackson in one direction and Jaclyn Smith in another, setting the stage for the separation that would define the future of the Angels' legacy. As Charlie's Angels moved deeper into its run, the pace that once felt thrilling began to stretch thin for Kate Jackson. Her role as Sabrina Duncan had grounded the series from the very beginning, giving it a sharpness and intelligence that shaped its identity. Yet behind the polished exterior, Jackson felt the strain of a show growing faster than anyone could control. Each new episode added to the pressure, and each script pushed the Angels further into a formula she no longer connected with. She had always taken her craft seriously, and the shift toward lighter, more routine storylines left her restless. Jackson later acknowledged that she grew frustrated, admitting openly that she caused tension when she believed the work deserved more depth. Her honesty revealed not conflict for the sake of conflict, but an artist pushing against limits she could no longer ignore. Alongside that creative tension came the demanding schedule. The series filmed long days, week after week, with little room for outside projects. Jackson cared deeply about the work she wanted to pursue, and she saw opportunities slipping away as the show consumed more of her time. The well-known dispute surrounding Kramer versus Kramer, a project she hoped to join, underscored the rigid boundaries set around her career. Studio decisions and production timelines created a wall she could not move, and the disappointment lingered. While some public narratives suggested she was let go due to difficulty on set, her own words painted a different picture. At the end of her third season, she expressed a calm resolve, saying the show had served her well, and she had served it well, and it was time to step away. This contrast between outside interpretations and Jackson's own understanding created a poignant echo around her departure. She was not leaving a failure behind. She was stepping away from a structure that no longer allowed her to grow. Each day on set added weight, and the emotional fatigue became harder to carry. Even the glamour that defined the series began to feel like a mask, one she no longer wished to wear. For viewers, the Angels seemed unshakable, united, and effortlessly radiant. For Jackson, the radiance had dimmed under the demands she could no longer meet with the same energy she once carried. The shift was not sudden, and it did not reflect a loss of affection for the women beside her. Jaclyn Smith and Jackson maintained a bond rooted in their early years of success. They navigated fame together, shared private frustrations, and endured the whirlwind that came with being part of a cultural phenomenon. The closeness Smith spoke of in later years did not fade easily, even as Jackson reached her limit. That connection remained a quiet thread running through the emotional landscape of Jackson's final season. While their paths would diverge, the foundation they built together during those first 3 years continued to hold meaning. As Season 3 unfolded between September 1978 and May 1979, the growing distance between Jackson's desires and the show's demands became unmistakable. She performed with the same professionalism that marked her earlier seasons, but her heart was turning toward a different future. When the final episodes wrapped, she stood at a crossroads shaped by ambition, exhaustion, and clarity. She had given the series her best, and now she was ready to reclaim the parts of her life that had been overtaken by the relentless production cycle. Kate Jackson's departure marked a change that reached far beyond casting. It signaled a shift in the emotional balance of the Angels and the beginning of a more challenging era for the series itself. And while the world looked for dramatic explanations, the truth rested in something simpler and more grounded: a woman recognizing that her path could no longer remain the same. When Kate Jackson stepped away at the end of the third season, the center of Charlie's Angels shifted almost immediately, and Jaclyn Smith found herself standing on ground that felt both familiar and newly fragile. She had entered the series as Kelly Garrett with a natural warmth, a kind of quiet strength that viewers connected to from the very beginning. That quality became even more important as the original trio changed. While new angels came and went, Smith's presence remained constant, anchoring the series through transitions that might have unraveled a less steady performer. Her steadiness was not created by a lack of pressure. The expectations on her grew heavier as the seasons progressed, especially after Farrah Fawcett's early departure and then Jackson's exit. Smith carried the responsibility of continuity, the thread that tied the evolving cast back to the show's origins. Viewers depended on her presence, and the producers leaned on it. She became the quiet heartbeat of the series, a role she never announced but fully embodied through 5 demanding seasons. What shaped Smith during this time was not ambition for spotlight or dominance. Instead, it was a temperament rooted in grace and patience. She approached each new storyline with calm resilience, adjusting to the shifting tone of the scripts without losing her connection to the character she had defined from the start. The producers introduced Cheryl Ladd after Fawcett left, then later brought in Shelley Hack and Tanya Roberts, and each transition reshaped the energy on set. Through these changes, Smith remained the familiar face audiences trusted, the one constant in a world of rotating partners and evolving dynamics. Her reflections in interviews many years later offer insight into why she stayed grounded when others struggled. Smith recalled the early days of filming with affection, remembering the camaraderie that formed naturally between her, Jackson, and Fawcett. She described the 3 of them as girls who genuinely enjoyed one another's company, a sentiment that shed light on the emotional foundation that supported her through the show's most difficult moments. Even as the production demands intensified, she held onto the memories of laughter, friendship, and shared discovery, allowing them to guide her rather than overwhelm her. That sense of loyalty extended beyond her relationships with the cast. Smith felt committed to the audience that embraced her from the very beginning. With each season renewal, she stepped into the role of Kelly Garrett with renewed dedication, determined to give viewers the consistency they had come to love. While others stepped away for personal or creative reasons, Smith continued, not out of obligation, but because she believed in the work and the connection it fostered. Her longevity was not about perfection, it was about steadiness. The strain that affected Jackson did not pass Smith by entirely. She faced the same long days, the same production pressures, and the same relentless pace. Yet her response differed. She absorbed the challenges without letting them fracture her relationship with the show, even as she felt the absence of the original trio. Each time a cast member left, she adapted, creating new rhythms with the women who joined her. Her resilience did not erase the sense of loss. It helped her move forward while honoring what had come before. As the series continued into seasons 4 and 5, Smith's role became even more essential. The show was changing, the ratings shifting, and the cultural moment that launched it was beginning to soften. Still, Smith stayed. Her presence reminded viewers of the excitement they felt in those first episodes, when Jackson, Fawcett, and Smith stood together as a perfectly balanced trio. This steadiness shaped the future of Charlie's Angels. It ensured that even as the cast transformed, the heart of the series remained recognizable. And as Smith looked back decades later, her reflections revealed a truth that often goes unnoticed. Sometimes the greatest strength within a whirlwind of change comes from the one person who chooses to remain rooted, even when everything around her begins to move. Kate Jackson's departure, in the spring of 1979, marked a turning point that reshaped Charlie's Angels in ways no producer, actor, or viewer could fully anticipate. When Season 3 came to a close in May of that year, the quiet tension that had followed Jackson through the later episodes finally reached its inevitable conclusion. She stepped away from the show she had helped bring to life, leaving behind a space that could not be filled simply by casting someone new. Jackson had been part of the foundation, the mind that had named the series, the presence that balanced intelligence with confidence. Her exit did not just remove a character, it altered the emotional weight of the entire production. Season 4 introduced Shelley Hack as Tiffany Wells, an actress tasked with entering a world that had already formed its rhythm. Hack brought her own style and professionalism. Yet the absence of the original trio shaped every part of the transition. The chemistry between Smith, Jackson, and Farrah Fawcett in the early years had set a template for what audiences expected. Each replacement angel brought new energy, but the original balance was something viewers could not forget. Even as the show moved forward, that memory lingered in every scene. For Jaclyn Smith, Jackson's departure marked the beginning of a new responsibility. She stepped into season 4 not only as Kelly Garrett, but as the sole remaining original angel. Her constancy had already become a stabilizing force, yet now it carried a deeper meaning. She was the bridge between what the show had been and what it was becoming. Viewers looked to her as the familiar anchor, and Smith understood the weight of that connection. She continued with grace, blending her performance with each new co-star while honoring the spirit of the series she helped define. The transition, however, was not easy for the show itself. Ratings began to shift, reflecting the challenge of capturing the magic that had once seemed effortless. The producers brought in new faces and fresh storylines, but the momentum of the first seasons was difficult to recapture. The chemistry that had launched Charlie's Angels onto magazine covers and into cultural history could not be recreated on command. Jackson's choice to leave had ripple effects that would follow the series until its conclusion in 1981. Yet, the story does not remain anchored in 1979. Decades later, long after the original run had ended, Smith and Jackson crossed paths in Los Angeles at a wedding in August of 2023. Their reunion stood as a quiet reminder that the bonds formed during those early years never entirely faded. Time had softened the intensity of their experiences, leaving behind the simple truth that they had navigated a rare journey together. Their shared history did not belong to the cameras, the network, or the public. It belonged to them. This later moment of connection offers perspective on Jackson's departure. Her decision was shaped by exhaustion, creative frustration, and a desire for opportunities the show's schedule would not allow. Smith's reflections, offered through interviews many years later, showed respect and understanding. She spoke warmly of the women who stood beside her during those early seasons, acknowledging the closeness that defined their beginnings. The loyalty she carried through 5 seasons did not erase the reality that each angel had to follow her own path. By the time Charlie's Angels ended in 1981, the series had undergone more changes than anyone could have imagined during its meteoric rise. Yet the original imprint of Jackson, Fawcett, and Smith remained steady in the public memory. Jackson's exit had altered the show's future, but it also illuminated the strength Smith carried as the last original angel standing. This shift created the emotional landscape that would frame Smith's reflections decades later. Her perspective at 80 offers not judgment or surprise, but clarity drawn from a lifetime of looking back at the moment the angels first changed shape. It set the stage for the understanding she finally chooses to share. By the time Jaclyn Smith turned 80 in October of 2025, enough distance had settled between her and the whirlwind of the late 1970s for her memories to take on a new clarity. She could look back on the rise of Charlie's Angels with a steadier heart, recalling not only the glamour that defined the show but the pressures, the choices, and the friendships that shaped its legacy. When she spoke about Kate Jackson in later years, her words carried the warmth of someone who had lived through an extraordinary moment with people who mattered deeply to her. She remembered the bond that formed during those first seasons, a bond she described with affection whenever she reflected on the show's early success. Smith never treated Jackson's departure as a mystery that needed unraveling. Instead, she treated it as the natural conclusion of a journey that had grown too heavy for her friend. Jackson had explained her own reasoning clearly, saying the series had served her well, and she had served it well, and that it was simply time to go. Smith honored that explanation by never reshaping it for dramatic effect. She understood that the pressures of the show, the demanding schedule, and the narrowing creative opportunities had taken their toll. Her reflections did not attempt to reinterpret Jackson's words, they simply acknowledged them. When Smith described the early days of filming, she often returned to the quiet moments between scenes, the shared laughter, and the feeling that she, Jaclyn, and Farrah Fawcett were young women learning how to navigate sudden fame together. She remembered those early years as girls having fun, a phrase she used to capture the ease and closeness that existed behind the camera. That closeness made Jackson's departure emotional in ways the public could not see, even though Smith carried on with the professionalism that defined her role throughout all 5 seasons. Time allowed Smith to speak more openly about how deeply she valued those bonds. Her reflections did not dwell on loss, but on gratitude, especially as she revisited memories shaped by the intensity of long production days and the demands of a show that had become a cultural phenomenon. She knew the trio's dynamic had set the standard for everything that followed. She also knew that the changes which came afterward marked a different era for the series, one that could not recapture the spark of its beginnings. Her perspective softened the decades, revealing that her loyalty to the show was intertwined with her loyalty to the women who helped build it. The reunion between Smith and Jackson in Los Angeles in August of 2023 offered a quiet glimpse into how their relationship endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. Their appearance together reminded fans that the core of their connection was never defined by conflict or distance. It was shaped instead by a shared history that belonged only to them. Even after countless retellings of the show's rise and its cast changes, the foundation of their friendship remained intact. As Smith looked back at 80, she did not speak with regret or with an attempt to rewrite what had already been said. She spoke with the steadiness that had carried her through every transition on the series. Her reflections illuminated the truth that the departure so many debated for decades was not a rupture, but a moment shaped by the personal boundaries and aspirations of a woman seeking a different path. Smith's perspective reframed the narrative not by adding new facts but by offering the emotional context only time could provide. Her voice, softened by years of experience, brought the story to its final shape. She honored Jackson's decision, acknowledged the challenges of those years, and celebrated the bond that survived them. In doing so, she gave the legacy of Charlie's Angels something deeper than nostalgia. She gave it understanding. Looking back now, the story of Charlie's Angels is shaped as much by the departures as by the dazzling rise that first captured America's attention. Jaclyn Smith and Kate Jackson began that journey together, 2 young women navigating sudden fame with determination and grace, building a bond that outlasted the noise surrounding them. Jackson's exit in 1979 changed the rhythm of the series, yet it never erased the foundation they created or the respect they carried for one another. At 80, Smith speaks with a gentleness shaped by decades of distance, offering reflections that bring clarity where speculation once lived. She honors Jackson's choice to move on, remembers the laughter that defined their early years, and recognizes how each of them followed the path they needed. Their story reminds us that legacy is formed not only in the moments shared on screen, but in the understanding that endures long after. For more emotional stories, check out this video.